But when you make a map, you want to think about 4 A's, and that's the intersection between accessible, accurate, aesthetic, and astounding. So as we look at all these maps that I'm about to show you, keep that in the back of your mind. And when you make your own map, you want to think about accomplishing all 4 of those. Okay. So, is anyone familiar with this? This is the first photograph of the Earth taken from outer space in 1972 on Apollo 8. And there's a cool video on the internet called the overview effect, what these astronauts feel when they see the Earth. And but when you, so at this point, GIS 50 years ago was something accessible only to a few people working for the government. And now we use it every day, Google Maps. And GIS is advancing so rapidly that things like Google Maps for other kinds of data are going to be very accessible soon. And I'll mention some of those things. So you don't even need to know how to use GIS software to benefit from it. So yeah, these are from Google Earth. You can now scan the moon, the surface of the moon and Mars. So we're definitely out there, but we're definitely realizing we're starting to, I think, turn back inward. And so this is, I don't know if you can see this with the lights, but this is a photograph of the Earth from space, looking at all the city lights of the world. You might be able to see it better.
The bottom one.
There we go. Don't fall asleep now. So those are the lights of the world. Now, these are some GIFs of land use changes all over the Earth. You have the Columbia Glacier Retreat, Las Vegas urban growth, and Lake Ermey. I'm not sure where that is actually. Does anyone know? And the Brazilian rainforest deforestation. So we can not only look at land use changes in the past, but we can, with GIS, project them in the future. And I'll mention that a little bit in the future, a little bit later on. So here is a cartogram of world population. So every single country here is scaled to its population. As you can see, Canada is tiny, and so is Russia, is in yellow right there. So this is the number of people in each country. Here's an interesting view of the world. This is cities of the world. And they've color-coded this for comparatively sustainable transportation versus those places which have the least sustainable transportation. So you can see the United States has a lot of red circles here. And Asia and Europe have a lot of green circles. What's the gray? The gray is that means they have the circle, they have the data for the population, but they don't have the data for the key. So, with GIS data, I've found myself in an identity crisis. With all this new data around with the internet, I don't know if you share that, but you can definitely start to ask, where do I fit into this? Where does my community fit into this? Where does my state fit into the world? This is an interesting one I found. This is the leading ancestry per county in the United States. So the largest ethnicity by blood in the United States is actually German, is light blue. And whoops. So you can see the resolution of data that we have is also getting more and more astounding. So looking at maps a lot, I kind of see things sometimes, like in the clouds. So I made this one. This is a map of the United States of election results, blue being Democrat, red being Republican, with some of these scaled to the size of the population or the size of the district voting. So I call that the American identity crisis. This kind of looks like a face to me. That looks like an eagle up there with a little mouse, which is also the United States. This looks like a tree to me, and this looks like a person being torn to shreds. And recently, for Father's Day last year, I got my dad one of those genetic testing kits, and they will give you a heat map of where in the world people share your genes the most. So that was the result of his genetic test there on the right. So I was glad to have confirmation that I do indeed descend from Vikings. And so here we are at Evergreen, and this is the data set you've been working with. So just some terminology and overview. I don't want to overload you, but the uses of GIS, of course, data analysis, design and planning, cartography and visualization, so making the maps, how they appear, what you're showing, how you use colors on the maps. Participatory GIS, we're going to talk about that. It's very exciting. Creating data, we'll talk a little bit about that. So the kinds of data, GIS is very simple. Anything that you're going to put on the map comes down to point, line, polygon, or raster. And I think that's all pretty intuitive except for raster data. And that's basically pixelated data of the Earth. So every single cell of the Earth has a value to it. And they have raster data for impervious surfaces, tree cover, the land cover data you've been using is also raster data. Some of the basic operations, which we may get to, doing a little bit of a tutorial. Arc Toolbox is where all the tools are within ArcMap. Now what you might not know is you can make your own tools, and you can make your own workflow. So some classic operations are clipping, overlaying, batch processing, summary statistics, selecting and exporting data using the editor, geocoding and digitizing data, that's entering new data into the system, and buffer analysis. And then some other words, Python scripting, that is the programming language behind GIS, so that's where you can design your own tools. Geodesign is the process of thinking about GIS analysis, and we'll get to that as well. So here are some cool GIS links. I can send this to you guys, but these are some portals for looking at spatial data without having to have the software. Social Explorer has all the US Census data back to 1790 for the country, and uses the American Community Survey 5,000 fields of data, income, race, money spent on groceries, anything. It's amazing. So there's this new kind of application happening with the web. It's called the story map. So you can click through a map, you can click on certain areas and bubbles will come up with more information. The Age of Humans is a really cool one about the Anthropocene, the era that we are now in, where human changes dwarf natural changes on the surface of the Earth. Then there's some really cool portals for finding your closest park. So map of play, that's for playgrounds, discover the forest, O-Ranger. And I feel like every week a new map application comes out. And these are some of the coolest GIS projects I've seen. Bay Game is participatory GIS in the Chesapeake Bay region, and that is involving a lot of people in a democratic bottom-up process of processing data and collaborative planning. The Hestia project is a 3D temporal map of Indianapolis's carbon emissions per building. So when you play the model forward, you actually see the roads pop up in the z-axis. That's the 3D axis during rush hour, and then they go down. And then the commercial inner city areas go up, the buildings go up during the day, and then they go down, and at night all the residential places go up as people turn their heat on and get home. So, and meanwhile, of course, the power plant and the airport are like giant bar graphs to the sky for carbon emissions. So that's a really, really cool project, and I think we'll be seeing more of that. And then the last one was a crowdsourced archaeology project to find the tomb of Genghis Khan in Eurasia. And they got 1 million people to log in and help process that data. And they basically made a little video game out of it. And so that's a very, very cool application. So this is the basic workflow of geodesign. And when we talk about maps and creating GIS data models, we think about representation models. So that's what you guys were looking at today. What's the land cover? Is it, and you ground truth it, is it indicative of what's really there? Process models, those are things that might change the land cover. Development, forestry, whatever you might have. Evaluation models, so what kind of ecosystem services are we getting from the landscape? Are beneficiaries able to access those ecosystem services? Could it be improved? And so on. What changes could be made to improve? And then how would those changes impact both social factors, ecological factors, and economic factors? And then decision models, ultimately with your GIS map and your analysis, can a change be made or should it be made? So when you kind of fill out all these things, it starts with the representation model usually, and that's the static view of any data set. Mushrooms in the forest, what's the distribution, what's the diversity, right? What's affecting mushroom growth and so on. So, well, that would be the process model. So that's the general workflow. And so then you get into mapping your data sets and mapping your workflow. We don't have to get into this too much, but this shows that you're going to start with your hydrogeography, you're going to start with brownfield sites, and some land use. And these are all representation models. And then these yellow things are the GIS operations, the clip, and then the green things are the resulting layers.